All right, good evening, everybody. I welcome you to the July meeting of Lawrence City Council. I see that it is 5:30 on the dot. We have a couple of city councilors that have yet to join us, but we hope they'll be along shortly. However, even without them present, I find that we do have a quorum, so I will call us to order. Tonight, we'll begin with an invocation and pledge of allegiance, and then I'll make some opening remarks. And by the end of that, y'all be tired of hearing from me. So if you will, please stand. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for the city of Lawrence and the people who make up this town. We thank you for those public servants who have made themselves available to step forward and serve your people. We thank you for their willingness to sacrifice their time and their talents and their energy to serve your people. We ask that you would keep us safe. We ask that you would bless our deliberations tonight. We ask that you would give us wisdom so that in all that we do as a council, we would bring glory to you, that we would advance your will for the people of Lawrence, and that we would build a better city together. We ask all these things in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. I don't want to overload you with information tonight, but we do have a pretty detailed report to give because there's been a lot going on. With that said, in a week where tragic news has dominated the headlines, I want to lift up Lawrence City Council and leaders of this city as being an example of how people can come from every walk of life, from every step along the political spectrum, and come together and work for the common interest of the people. And my hope would be that our leaders across the nation would follow the example of this council in learning how to work together. Because we've had such hard news, I want to share with you some good news. There's a lot to share. So we'll start off with an announcement that I received from Mr. Bolt just before our meeting. The American Legion is celebrating their grand opening. So if you want to mark your calendars for September 28th at 3 p.m., their new facility is located at 19 Choctaw Street. City of Lawrence has been home to the American Legion Post 25 since just after World War I, and this is the first time they will have a home of their own. So we congratulate them, and we appreciate their reaching out to council to welcome us. We just held Freedom Fest 2024 on July 3rd. We had vendors from as far away as Columbia, South Carolina. We had visitors who came to celebrate with us from Florida and Georgia and North Carolina. We're still waiting on the results from our Visitor 360 report that provided us information last year about the number of attendees. Last year we had roughly 10,000 people that visited. Based upon a cursory review of the data, we're told that we seem to be on track with where we were last year, but we should have further details soon. In future years, the partnership that we have with the Chamber of Commerce in Lawrence County will allow us to be able to use a service they have for that sort of data and for other events. So that'll be a help for us in planning. But I can tell you, just from an anecdotal standpoint, the owners of Groucho's Deli, I don't know if those happen to be here tonight, tell us that their revenue was up 100% week to week, Wednesday to Wednesday. And really, that's a great example of why we have that Freedom Fest event right in the downtown area, because it's one thing that we can do as a city simply by using the location of our public festivals and events to support our small businesses. So it's nice to see that's having the intended effect. As far as departmental updates, we hear from the fire department, their annual fire inspections are nearing completion. They have less than 40 inspections per shift left to do. We also have received word from Lawrence County as a follow-up to the action that our council has taken in our last two meetings to approve the expansion of our fire service territory, that the county approved that expansion as well, and so both sides are now authorized to finalize that agreement. So we appreciate the county's cooperation in making that happen and allowing us to maintain our top-tier ISO rating. We have an announcement as far as streets and sanitation goes. The building itself has gotten its certificate of occupancy, got that last week. They're getting some furniture in as we speak. We're announcing today that we'll have a media day on July 22nd, which will allow us to invite members of the media to come tour the building, see the new facility, see the contrast between the old streets and sanitation facility versus what we have now, and be able to help us get that word out to the public. And then on July 23rd at 8 a.m., the recycling center will be open to the public. So hope that's welcome news for everybody. We have new directional signage that's coming soon to the city that will help better mark the entrances into the city limits, into neighborhood areas that will point the way to our parks, better mark some of our parks. So look out for that in the coming weeks. This afternoon, I had an opportunity to attend the Lawrence County Development Corporation's monthly meeting. City of Lawrence is a supporter of LCDC, and so just a few statistics to share with you. Unemployment in Lawrence County right now is 3.8%. That is on track with South Carolina's statewide unemployment rate of 3.4%. We learned that SC Works is hosting a career fair this Thursday between 2 and 4 at Lawrence High School, and that'll give recent grads and any members of the public who are interested in looking for employment to go sign up for SC Works and I believe meet with representatives of local employers. So for those recent grads that have finished high school, had a little time down at the beach, spent all mom and dad's money, and our reality setting in, I think, as I said it this afternoon, and looking to earn a little money of their own, this will be an opportunity to get a great job. It is it's sort of bittersweet for me that my term as president of the Association of South Carolina Mayors will be ending at the end of this week. It is a tremendous honor to me, a tremendous honor to this city, I believe, that we would be on the radar, that Lawrence Mayor would be on the radar to have such a position. And I don't look at that as some accolade for Nathan Sin, but more of a vote of confidence in City of Lawrence and Lawrence City Council for the leadership that we have exercised as a body and the direction the city is going in, and the esteem that the other 270 municipalities across the state hold the city in, that that we would be seen as leaders. So the visibility that Laurens has received through my having this role has been a wonderful thing. It's wonderful talking to other mayors at Association of Mayors meetings where they come up and say, how'd you do it? What do you have in Laurens that is working? And to be able to share with them some of our successes is truly a pleasure and an honor. As one of my last duties as president of the Association of South Carolina Mayors, and in my capacity as mayor of the city of Laurens, I attended the South Carolina Rural Transit Conference in Clemson this past Wednesday. It was the second ever rural transit conference that was held. And I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons that I was invited was to take part in a panel and speak about the impact and challenges to implementing public transit, because Laurens is one of the 2 counties in South Carolina not to have public transit. Think of, I don't want to name any particular names, but if we think of some of the most rural, most remote counties in South Carolina, to think that some of those places have been able to make it work and we have not, I believe presents a real challenge to us as leaders to really tackle that issue and be serious about it. To be honest with you, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'll be glad to find that out for you. I got some other stats at that meeting that I want to share with you, because I think it sort of helps frame the picture of some of the business that is before City Council tonight. We heard from South Carolina Secretary of Transportation, Justin Powell, and he informed us that Charleston Harbor is now the deepest harbor on the East Coast. We currently get 2.4 million containers per year that flow through the Port of Charleston. By 2027, 3 years from now, less than 3 years from now, the state is projecting that 7.2 million containers will flow through the Port of Charleston, more than double the current amount. And after they come into the Port of Charleston, where will they go? Onto our roads, onto our rail. Currently, DOT reports that they have a 30-year backlog of deferred maintenance that they're tackling. To their credit, the Secretary Powell acknowledged that DOT more or less has been the highway department, and that the investment that our state has made at the state level in transit, which has been unchanged since 1986, needs to be rebalanced. That there needs to be more of an effort to focus more on just highways. That there needs to be a new perspective towards rural communities. The feedback that I gave, just so you all are aware, is that as long as we look at our interstate roadways as conduits to get people to and from Greenville and Charleston and Columbia and through the more rural parts of our state, we will continually have need for widening and replacement and repaving of those roads at a faster rate. The alternative to me is clear, that we diversify the success of some of our larger cities and distribute that through the more rural areas of the state. I told the Secretary that from time to time when I've attended meetings in Columbia and I have to drive through the construction on 26, that I wish I had a fraction of the money that is being spent on those repairs, to make quality of life improvements in the city of Lawrence. If we were to do that, that means that Lawrence becomes a more attractive place for people to live and work. And if they're living and working in Lawrence, we're not so dependent on our interstate system. For what it's worth, there seemed to be a lot of buy-in across the room from a lot of different leaders from across the state about that. With that said, the need to repair and upgrade our roads is real. I-26 was built when South Carolina had 2.5 million residents. Now we have more than 5. A lot of those repairs are being done by the gas tax that was raised in 2017. By way of context, North Carolina pays 40.4 cents per gallon. Georgia pays 32.3 cents per gallon. South Carolina pays the lowest of all at 28.75 cents per gallon, and that's even after the increase. As a result of that increase in the expanded funding that made available by it, DOT now has the most construction going on at any time in our state's history. We also heard from the Department of Employment and Workforce from Deputy Director Nina Staggers. She informed us that South Carolina has the fifth largest number of job openings of any state in the United States. We had a second year of record investment in South Carolina with $9 billion of investment and 14,000 announced jobs. And as I said, South Carolina is the fastest growing state in the nation. According to the South Carolina Department of Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, we have a estimated 5,373,555 residents as of this time last year, but estimates lead us to believe that there will be another 1 million residents in South Carolina by 2042. South Carolina is definitely growing, but I can also report that Lawrence is definitely growing. We have worked very hard to send the message that Lawrence is open for business, and indeed we are. In addition to some of our most recently opened new businesses like Groucho's, I'm happy to report that Big Air, Harper Commons, Jersey Mike's, Waffle House, and a newly renovated branch of the United Community Bank will all open in the coming weeks right here in town. We can bear this out with our internal statistics here in the city. Business licenses in the 22-23 fiscal year brought the city $1.5 million in revenue. That has increased to $1.9 million in the 23-24 year, which is an increase of $400,000. Permits pulled in the city of Lawrence and revenue from permits pulled in the city of Lawrence have increased by 100%, doubled. Even before the construction of new homes in Lawrence, we're seeing increased revenue from property taxes. That shows us that the value of the homes that are already here and have already been built are increasing. If you take into consideration the fact that the largest asset of any family in Lawrence is most likely going to be their home, that means that Lawrence New Prosperity means that that asset is worth today more than it was years in the not too distant past, I should say. However, in order to accommodate the growth that is on the way, we still have a need for more housing. And one of the things that has become very clear from public input and from market studies is that we have a desperate need for rental housing. There are a lot of people who have the ability to earn a good wage at a great job at one of our manufacturing facilities, but they may not have enough money saved up for a down payment, or they may not have a credit score that qualifies for a mortgage. That doesn't mean that we don't want them to be our residents. And so that brings me to a couple of the opportunities and challenges that we have before us tonight. In terms of opportunities, on tonight's agenda, we will address an annexation petition from Watts Mill. Watts Mill has sat vacant for more than 30 years. It has been derelict and overgrown, and tonight we have before us a petition for annexation, which will bring that mill site into the city limits and will be used to provide desperately needed rental housing. I will also add, we're not just talking any rental housing. We have worked for the past 2.5 years with the petitioners who are before us tonight to come up with a plan, and the standard all along that we have worked to keep to is that we don't want a neighborhood that just meets today's need, but a neighborhood that is attractive, that encourages community, that is safe, and is beautiful. We want neighborhoods that are places that not only pass the 5-year test, but the 50-year test, and hopefully the 150-year test. And I know we have some folks here with us tonight. Stormy, I just appreciate you and your team's dedication to the city of Laurens and to your efforts to bring what is needed, but to do it in a way that we can all be proud of. That represents a $50 million investment in just that site alone. And of course, the hope is that as that site redevelops and gets a second life, that becomes a catalyst for private investment and rejuvenation for the entire Watts Mill area. Now, with growth of that kind come challenges, and we are dedicated to responsible growth. When I say we, I've had enough conversations privately and individually with members of council, and I know my administration is dedicated to responsible growth. If we've heard anything from the public, it's that we don't want the sort of Anytown USA cookie cutter, uncontrolled mass cancerous growth that has consumed other communities. We want to preserve and maintain the unique character of the city of Laurens. But to preserve and maintain the unique character of the city of Laurens, it means we have to define it. We can't preserve what we can't put our arms around and say what is and what isn't. And so we have, for months now, been in the process of developing a comprehensive plan and now a updated land use ordinance to go along with it, which learns the lessons of the past 30 years and meets the challenges of today's growth and puts us on a path towards responsible, steady growth in the future. We've had more than 6 public input sessions where we invited members of the public from all parts of the city to come and give their input. And based upon that input, we have an ordinance that is in place, or excuse me, that is being written that we can put in place in the next few months, which will help us avoid, I think, the things that the community rightfully has expressed concern about. So, getting to that point and being able to pass that ordinance requires us to do some planning, and so we have an ordinance before us tonight that allows that to happen. So, that was a lot of information to throw at you, but that, I hope, frames what brings us here tonight, and I hope, honestly, helps put things in perspective. The question is not whether South Carolina is going to grow and whether Lawrence is going to grow with it, but how. And I'm proud of my administration and my colleagues here on council in their dedication to doing it the right way. So, with that said, those are all the remarks I have. The next item up on the agenda is our public comment period. I see from our city administrator that we haven't received no requests for public comment that comply with the rules. And so that takes us to the consent agenda, the third item on our agenda, which is approval of the agenda for tonight and approval of the minutes from our June 18th meeting. Do I hear any motions concerning the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Lowry. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Mr. Bolt bet you to it. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda as printed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the consent agenda items are approved. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is new business. We have no old business this month before us. And the first item of new business we have is a report from Gary Bailey from Love Bailey, presenting the audit from the 2022-23 fiscal year. Mr. Bailey.
Mayor, council, it's good to see everyone. That was a lot of information. It was good information. You know, we audit municipalities around the state, and I hear, different things, but since this is my neighborhood, it's a lot more special to hear all those good things, since we're here locally as well. I'm sorry, some of the scheduling, we didn't get here a little bit sooner. We've had the audit done for several months, but glad we're here tonight. And it's really good news. The city is doing well, just as the mayor was saying. And what I gave you is a summary. You have the whole audit report, which is it's about 100 pages. So I gave you a 3-page summary that I think is a little bit easier to follow, and also gives you an idea of what the last 4 years looks like. So I'm showing you the general fund from 20 to 23 there. And I will say, we did issue an unqualified opinion, so that's what you want. It's a clean opinion. It's the opinion the city wants to receive. And so what I'm showing you here is just show your revenues and expenditures over the years. And obviously, we haven't gotten into 24 yet, but you can see the mayor was saying you were at 1.5 in business license in 23, that third line down on the 23 column. And it was up to 1.9 for the year just into 24. And you can see that's went. I was doing the math real quick, and that's about a 46% increase in business license over the last 5 years. It's a huge growth there. And you saw your overall your general fund. This is just general funds. So this doesn't include any ARPA dollars. This doesn't include hospitality. This is just your general fund, so you can see how basically your main operating fund's doing. And you can see revenue overall increased just about 7% to 7.58 million. And there was a lot of things. I mean, property tax increased, more lost funds, business license increased, state funds increased, Lawrence CPW fees increased. Most everything else that didn't increase was fairly consistent with the previous year. So really have done a good job, and you can see again from 20 to 23 where your revenue line has went from 6.2 to 7.5 over the last 4 years. And then you look at your expenditure. So I break this down a little bit different than the audit report. The audit report, obviously, we follow standards that we have to report on, but I'm kind of a cash flow guy, and I like to see things from a standpoint of how much cash to receive from operations before we invest in capital outlay and pay for debt. So that's what I'm doing here. When you see that operating income, that's really important, because after the city collected their revenues in the general fund and they paid just the operating expenditures, you can see what your net operating amount was. And it was very consistent with last year at $482,000. And that's a big increase from 20 and 21, where it was 280 and 123, and now you're closer to $500,000. So what that does is that allows you to pay debt service, that allows you to invest in capital outlay. Those kind of things. So that's what I'm trying to show you here, is just showing you that before you do any of these other investments, you gotta make sure you're cash flowing operations, and you're doing that well, and that's been a good 2 years. And, of course, you're coming out of COVID in 20, so you had some issues and challenges there like everyone else. Overall, your expenses did increase a little bit more than revenues at 7.8%. Almost all of that was salary and benefits, and then just your normal increases that everybody's kind of experienced with inflation, things like that. But insurance costs, just overall increases across the board, but salary and benefits was the biggest piece. Overall, salary and benefits increased 7.4% from the previous year. Some of that's health insurance, some of that's cost of living increases, some of that's increase to state retirement, but nothing concerning there. And then when you go a little further down, you'll see everything else where you got some additional debt to offset the $1 million in capital outlay. That was $1 million just in the general fund. You also had, I'll show you some in ARPA funds and some spent with the hospitality. But overall, you had a positive change in fund balance of $231,000 for the year, which is pretty consistent with last year, which is $285,000. That section there at the bottom, I'm kind of giving you an idea of where the general fund's spending most of their operating dollars. 79%, pretty consistent with the previous year, is going to salary and benefits. That, you see that across, you see that when we audit municipalities, between labor that you have on the payroll or outsourced labor, contract labor, the combination of those are typically around the 70 to 80% because you're providing services. You have more on payroll than contract. Some may have 60% payroll and 20% contract. You just happen to have more on payroll than you do contracted out. So those are very consistent numbers with all the other municipalities we audited, like I said, across the state. And you can see just in those 4 categories, salary, fuel, repairs, garbage expense, it's 92 cents of every dollar that you're spending. So it's not like you're not spending anything on operations that's really just not operations. I mean, the other 8% is just your basic office supplies and utilities and insurance, property insurance, those kind of things. But overall, it was a good year, and we're already starting on the 24, doing some internal controls and things, and it sounds like 24 is going to be even a better year. So that's your general fund. The next page is 2 sections. The top section is your hospitality, and the bottom section is just kind of showing you where you spent the ARPA funds over the last couple of years. Hospitality, you can see it's consistently growing. It grew from $712,000 in 22 to $773,000 in 23. So it just goes back to more people being here and more people spending in Lawrence. Your tourism dollars have been fairly consistent, right around $360,000 every year for the last 4 years. So you actually netted about $409,000 from the operations, of which you spent some on $300,000 in capital outlay, and so you ended up with a positive change in fund balance of $158,000. And then the ARPA funds, the way that works is you record ARPA funds as revenue when you use them. So you've gotten the same amount in 22 and 23. At the end of 23, you still had about 1.4 million in ARPA dollars. That'll get recorded as revenue in 24. So that just shows you, like in 23, almost all of the ARPA funds were used for capital outlay, which is really what it's really intended for, is to not to be operations, but to give you an opportunity to fund projects, one-time projects, which the city has done a really good job on that. So the last page I want to share with you is just the balance sheet at the end of the year, just showing you your cash accounts. Some are unrestricted, some are restricted. So if you look at that fiscal 23, FY 2023 column, the city had 4.3 million unrestricted cash at the end of 6/30/23. Based on your general fund operating expenditures, it's about 7.3 months of cash in hand, which increased about a month from the previous year. we always say that the GFOA wants you to have at least 90 days, on the 60 days, we think you should have 90 to 120 days, just because, as you know, funding comes in at different times, business license, property taxes, sometimes you have grants you gotta spend and then get reimbursed. So you're doing a great job at over 7 months of cash on hand. As I tell a lot of municipalities, it's not a green light to spend it, that's actually a green light to say, we're doing well, we have a nice reserve to help us in those times where we have to dip into the cash before we collect. So you're doing a good job there. You can see the other funds there that are restricted. Hospitality, the HT, 642,000. The ARPA that I mentioned, you still have 1.4. And then just restricted cash, that might be police funds, little accounts of 14,000. Overall, your capital assets right there in the middle increased by $3 million. And just a reminder, you spent a lot of money on this facility here, municipal building. You spent some money on, that was still ongoing at this point, City Hall, streets and sanitations. You had a big deposit at this point on the trash trucks that are sitting out there. I don't think they've all come in yet, have they? Or have they all come in now? Yeah. And so a good portion of your monies were spent on capital outlay, over $3 million. So I wanted to point that out, that, you know, the ARPA really helped there, but you spent all that money on capital outlay and still increased your cash balance, unrestricted cash balance by about $900,000. So that was really good. You'll notice your AP is up. That's due to all the projects. So at the end of the year, it was just a lot of projects outstanding that had invoices that just ended up getting paid in July, but the work had already been done at June 30th, and they ended up getting paid in July or August. So that's the only reason that your AP is up higher than it was in the previous year. Overall, fund balance is about $11.765 million. You can see your pensions, $5.3 million. It increased a little bit. Just a reminder, that's the state. That's the state pension that's underfunded, and you have to put $5.3 million on your books for that. So that hurts your net position, even though it's not technically your debt or your liability. But overall, I showed you where your revenue, your debt there at the bottom, revenue bonds, GO bonds, notes payable, you were still under the 8% property tax assessment on your GO bonds. You didn't have any issues there. So overall, the city did really well. It's continuing to do well. It looks like 24 is also going to be another good year. So it's a lot of information, like the mayor said, a lot of information. So we're glad to answer any questions. I was say, I don't believe I can, I can invest in, others invest in it too.
All right, if there are no questions, I just want to take this opportunity to say, first, Gary, thank you and your team for all your hard work in putting together this audit. I would also be remiss if we didn't take the opportunity to thank our intrepid city administrator for all his hard work in making sure that the books work, and that we're in a good financial position. So thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. That audit is presented for information, so no action or vote is necessary by council. We move on to the second item of new business before us tonight, and that is Ordinance 7-24-1, which is annexation ordinance, 100% petition, requesting annexation of 2 parcels of real property containing 20.426 acres and 0.812 acres. Those are the tracts which all of us would be familiar with as the old Watts Mill site. That is the ordinance before us. Do I hear any motions concerning it?
Second.
I think Ms. Campbell beat y'all to the punch, but I appreciate the enthusiasm. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Certainly. Ms. Sullivan?
I just want to ask some questions, because, I do notice,
You wanna-
sorry. First, I want to say that I am excited about that as well. I want to ask some questions for transparency, because I don't understand the wording, the 100% petition, and it's saying a portion of one of the plots that's being, annexed. Thank you. So, it doesn't specifically says what portion of the lot that is gonna be, annexed, so that's my question about it, for transparency.
Good questions. So, 100% petition is under state law, there are a limited number of means that a annexation can happen. It can happen because a certain percentage of ownership of property petitions the municipality to come in. It could happen because the city wants to annex a piece of property and holds a referendum, and the residents of that area vote to come in. In this circumstance, we're dealing with two parcels, and 100% of the ownership of those parcels, meaning the entity that owns 100% of the ownership interest of those parcels has come to city council and said, we'd like to come into the city. So does that answer the 100% portion of your question?
It does,
All
that
right.
portion, yes.
All right, so the portion question is, when plats are prepared for legal tracts, if a parcel, if like let's say
May I interject?
a farm
Yeah.
is subdivided, and let's say you got two brothers, and one gets one portion, and one brother gets the other portion.
That's what I thought.
It was coming from something that was one whole, and that one whole would have had a tax map number.
Right,
So if a portion is being annexed, it would be a portion of the old larger tract that has the tax map number.
why wasn't it parceled off before?
I don't have the information, but I believe we have a representative from the petitioner. Stormy, would you
Yes.
care to
very good
clear that up?
question. Yes, very good question. So where the parcel says where the old mill was, just across the street on the other side of Swiger Avenue is where the mill's electrical infrastructure is. That portion where the electrical infrastructure was, we are not planning on developing, so we just didn't want it to get like muffled in with this annexation, since it's not part of the actual $50 million investment. We will probably annex that portion in the future, but because they will be separate and will be part of that project, we just didn't want to confuse anybody. So I guess we ended up confusing you along the way, but anyways, so just to add to what he was saying, it's just the portion on the other side of Swigert Avenue.
Okay, on the other side of the road,
Yes, Councilwoman.
okay. So that doesn't separate it by an easement or anything, does it?
No.
Okay,
Anytime there is an annexation request, the parcels have to be contiguous, meaning
Right.
touch a piece of existing city property.
uh,
In the case of this site, there's a corner of the property across Lucas Avenue that overlaps the corner of the Watts Mill property.
right, right,
And so a road will not defeat that contiguity,
that's right,
and so we're able to take it from this side over to the Watts Mill side.
that's right, okay.
But to be clear, we're only, I know council knows this, but for the benefit of anybody who may be watching, we're only talking about the Watts Mill site itself.
Right.
The entire neighborhood around there, although it is referred to as Watts Mill by a lot of
It's
folks,
not,
is
yeah.
not being annexed in the city by what we're doing here tonight.
That's a good
That's
point.
good, that's awesome, yeah.
Did that answer your questions?
That answers my question,
I-
that piece.
I appreciate your diligence on that.
Right.
Do we have any other questions, any other discussion?
I was thinking about the whole Watts Mill. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about the whole Watts Mill area as well. And you said you're only gonna do a portion of that section, or not just the mill section where the mill were. That's all you're gonna do.
That's all we own. We only own that from, let's say, 20 to 21 acres. So that's all that we have the ability to redevelop. We don't have any plans to gobble up anybody's home or anything like that around there. So,
Good point.
Thank you for doing that.
yeah.
That's what I was going to
Mhm.
say. I really appreciate your vision for that site, because as said earlier, it's been sitting there for years and years, and I'm glad to know that you're going to leave that tile there also. So I'm very appreciative to you all. Mhm.
Thank you, Stormy. That, I will crow a little bit if I can. You know, there's a lot of times where some of the most visible things that we are doing get a lot of attention. Sometimes people get on social media and things. The city only cares about this thing because that's the thing that you see on the surface. But there's a whole lot of hard work and a whole lot of time that goes into bringing stuff to this point behind the scenes, and we can't talk about it till we can talk about it. So it's nice to be able to talk about it. But again, I appreciate all the hard work on y'all's end.
Exciting, yeah.
All righty, if there is no further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of approval of ordinance 7-24-1, which is annexation petition on first reading, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the ordinance is approved on first reading. All righty. Moving on to the last order of business before us tonight is ordinance 7-24-2, an ordinance of the City of Lawrence to impose a planning assessment period on permits, approvals, or other authorizations of subdivisions of property, multifamily developments, and new or relocated manufactured homes within the city for a period of 6 months. This ordinance allows our planning process, which is underway, to take place. I'll just let council know for the sake of your information that I have received a first draft in my email that I haven't even had a chance to dive into yet of our new ordinance. But we anticipate being able to put that ordinance in our finalized comprehensive plan before city council in the very near future. So this is sort of a momentary pause, but this allows us to sort of make sure we have the opportunity to complete that planning process before we move forward with other potential developments. So that is the proposed ordinance before us. Are there any motions?
I'll make a motion, we discuss ordinance -7-24-2 as presented.
Second.
Oh, gosh, I don't know that I could pick that one out. I know we have a motion and I know we have a second, but I couldn't tell who did it. Hopefully our city clerk can figure that one out. All righty, is there any discussion?
So, Mr. Mayor, my understanding of this is an ordinance for us to dive deeper into our current zoning, and our current ordinance, as we have discovered some work. Hasn't had any work in quite some time. I noticed today, I was reading on the internet, and I see where Falmouth is doing the same thing that we're talking about. Basically taking a pause here to not overdevelop our city, not let things come into our city that don't need to be here. We haven't visited this, as far as I can remember, Ms. Miller? Yeah, and it's time.
All right.
And I'm really glad to see this, that we'll just take a pause. We're open for business, and we need everybody to know that, but we also need to know that we're open for business for responsible growth. And we've heard the citizens say that. They're scared, not in a bad way, of all the growth that we are seeing, all the things that are being announced. And we need to put everybody at ease that we're doing our job to protect the city that we all love. So, I welcome this. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Councilman Larry. By way of context, since you raised the issue of the outdatedness of our current ordinance, our land use ordinance was passed in 1995. And we've learned a lot about responsible planning since 1995, and frankly, the world has changed in terms of the kind of development that has happened since 1995. With that said, if I can share one statistic with you, this afternoon I was looking at the statistics from Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, and the percentage of growth in the past year from the city of Greenville and the city of Lawrence by percentage is pretty close. I don't want to give you bad figures, but less than 2%, around 1.5% as I recall. For Greenville County, that meant 10,000 new residents. For Lawrence County, it means less than 1,000 in the whole county. So to the extent anybody's worried about Lawrence turning into a combination of Woodruff Road and Simpsonville the day after tomorrow, we can breathe a little bit and hopefully allay their fears that that is not the case. We're growing at a very slow, I want to say slow, but a steady, responsible pace. But now is exactly the time to be doing what we're doing to make sure before we do see a much faster rate of growth that we have the ordinances in place that preserve the character of Lawrence, at least in my opinion. Ms. Miller.
Yes, and I would like to add to that because we would have to look at, because the public, people think that we only thinking about the $300,000, $400,000, $600,000 home. We want to make affordable homes for everybody, not just housing development in certain areas. So one thing that to keep up with the growth, as I said earlier, about these tiny homes and the other things that's taking place to make affordable home for people. Although we have to have a park or a place, but our ordinance does not allow anything like this to happen. So actually we need, some time ago we went to the municipal association as we're getting ready to go now. And you learn how the other municipalities or cities is growing with affordable homes that people can afford, and those being attractive to those to come into our city. And believe it or not, people are coming to our city, our county, because of our taxes too. So let's look at that also. Where there's growth, it's going to be revenue, but our taxes are lower than anybody in the upstate.
Well,
I know we start talking about taxes, everybody get, you know, I'm on my way out anyway, but people really get upset. But we want to grow, we want to keep up. So we got to be ready in all ways, all aspects. of our ordinance. So we are here as a council for everybody. That's all I got to say.
I appreciate this comments, Ms. Miller. I think based upon the financial report that we received tonight, we haven't had 600 new homes built in the past year, and yet property tax revenues are up. That means that we have houses that are worth more. So if we can benefit the citizens by having their biggest investment be worth more, and we can provide revenue to local government to be able to provide better services to our residents, it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
But my biggest concern, I'm not throwing stones at previous administrations, because everybody finds themselves in the particular circumstances they find themselves in when they sit in this chair, or any of the ones y'all are sitting in. But when a company like ZF decides they're gonna come to Lawrence, in my mind, we need to make sure that we have houses for ZF's workers to live in the city of Lawrence. ZF recently announced that they are doubling the size of their workforce. If we're not thinking about how to make sure that at least some good percentage of those folks live right here in the city of Lawrence and help pay our property taxes and send their kids to our schools and shop at our restaurants and use our accountants, then we're missing a trick. So growth can be scary,
It's gonna be good.
but if we plan properly, and what I hope the public hears tonight is that we hear you. We don't want to become Anytown USA, but we got to have new ordinance to avoid that. This allows us to make that happen.
Amen.
We should all be thankful that we have this problem.
Yes.
Amen.
We should all be thankful that this is something we have to address, because there's some cities that don't have to address this, and there's some that are not too far from us. And we should all be thankful.
Mayor, I'd just like to say that I see more and more people right now improving their homes. I really do. You go right up down the street, and I see more and more people that's improving their homes, just not only on South Parker Street, but there's some on West Main Street.
Mhm.
And I see more people as they ride through the community, that putting new sidings and different things on the house. So I think a lot of residents now are taking a lot more interest in the home that they have and improving. And that's good, and I think that's it.
Mr. Belt, to your point, I mean, if we're talking about, and to Ms. Miller's, if we're talking about affordable, accessible housing, a house that's already built that needs renovation is going to be much easier to get into than ground-up new construction. And so being able to revitalize the existing neighborhoods in our town is a major part of that. But again, we have things in our current code that make that difficult. So I think this is one of a clear mandate that we've gotten from the public. And I look forward to kind of being able to finalize the process, presenting an updated comp plan and land use plan to city council. But the ordinance before us tonight allows us a little breathing room to get that done.
Well, I had one more point to what I just said about people, but we also have some houses that needs to be demolished. And we haven't worked on any of that, but we do have, or at least I have.
Well, I'll put it this way, just because you hadn't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not getting worked on.
I want to say this because I know, with what's going on now in our building zoning, and there is a lot of I'm looking forward to going to Greenville. There's a lot of, you mentioned revitalization, and it was years ago, 10 or 20 years ago, when we had the money, when the government was looking at revitalization, communities. And Lawrence was part of that through Upper Savannah, so prayerfully and hopefully that this is on the radar for our next, next person in charge to look into is revitalization, restoring homes and whatnot. Because there's a lot of, like you said earlier, there's a lot of, it's cheaper, I was saying, cheaper to keep it. It's cheaper to already to redo your house or to upgrade your house than to be up on the ground.
So to that point, one of the things that I have spoken with the fellow that's helping write our ordinance is there needs to protect structures so that we don't lose. I'll take Lawrence Mill area as an example. When Lawrence Mill was built at the turn of the century, the homes around it were award-winning and got all sorts of recognition because of the quality that the mill used in building those homes. In order to maintain the character of that neighborhood, my hope would be that we don't just have somebody buy several lots, wipe out those houses, and erase that history. Now, with that said, they were built at the turn of the century. Their windows leak like sieves. They don't have air conditioning. And for whatever folks are paying in rent there, they're probably paying almost that much, if not more, to the CPW to heat and cool it. So, do we want to have an ordinance in place that, in the name of historic preservation, prevents somebody from being able to modernize a building like that and have it a little bit more airtight? To me, I think that would be self-defeating. On the other hand, we have historic preservation protections that cover the square and only the square. And we've heard from petitions from our residents on West Main and South Harper that they would like to see historic preservation protections expanded to those existing historic districts. But what about the historic homes between them? What about historic homes in other parts of the city that are worthy of some historic preservation protection? Right now, we have nothing on the books that preserves those properties. So there's so many facets to how we approach what the need is here. But the end goal, at least as far as I'm concerned, is we made a promise that we were going to protect the unique character of the city of Lawrence. So to do that, we have to have an ordinance that actually serves that purpose. And we just need a few months to get that across the finish line.
Sounds good.
All righty. Any further discussion? If we've beaten that horse dead, I will call the question. All those in favor of approval of ordinance 7-24-2, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And the ordinance is approved on first reading. That brings us to the end of tonight's agenda and spirited discussion. And so I turn to my colleague, the Mayor Pro Tem.
I would love to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
We have a motion to adjourn to enjoy the very hot weather. Is there a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Any opposed, no. Let's get out of here. Thank you.